Welcome. A big applause as well for the head of business and Web3 at Fiolegal, Luíza Castro. Welcome. The Senior Association at Cuatrecasas, the President of Blockchain and Cryptocurrencies Portuguese Association, Nuno Lima da Luís. Welcome as well. And the facilitator of this conversation will be the Chief Investment Officer at Yacooba Labs, Luís Bravo. But before I give you the voice to speak, there's a bunch of lawyers in here on the stage. I mean, they're not judges, but we do need this judge gavel. When you start, at the end, when we come up with some solutions. Good luck with the crypto regulation.
So, I think this is... We had to find a way of making talking about regulation exciting, so this is the exciting moment. Thank you all for being here. And thank you, Tommaso, Luiza, and Nuno Lima for accepting to talk a bit about this thing. There was this sentence that it was very famous in politics about Ronald Reagan. If it moves, tax it. If it keeps moving, regulate it. So I think that we are at a stage, and because blockchain, Bitcoin, and all the cryptocurrencies, it's a huge tendency for the future. We see central banks going forward with centralized digital currencies. And of course, this is no exception that it will bring some challenges also on how to keep this delicate balancing act between private and what needs to be transported for the regulatory framework. So I would say that as a first challenge, and I would start for Luiza, though of course leaving you all with the follow-ups. As a first topic is how do you see this separation between what is private and has to be kept within the individual framework of the digital transactions, and what is the need of separating this from the regulation? So as we can see it and perceive, blockchain came with an ideology also of keeping the state away. Now it seems like we want to bring the state in so things can be more secure. So this is the challenge on how can we balance all these contrarian interests.
Well, to start, this is a problem that we even have nowadays in the Web 2, Web 1, traditional companies, medias, and all, once we're talking about privacy specifically. And then once we bring this to blockchain, once we're talking about privacy, it brings a new problem that we didn't have before, not as is now. That is, everything is transparent, and most things cannot be changed, which for a lot of parts is great. For other parts, not so much. If we're talking specifically of data, we have data privacy, we have our GPT, we have the rights to be forgotten. How can we do this in the blockchain if I put in information and information is there forever, as is now? So we start having different problems, like different ways of having the same problems. It's not that the problem per se is new. We have the same problem with the internet today, to be honest. If you put a picture there, you can enter with a bunch of lawsuits, most likely. If people want, the picture will still be there. But once you're talking about blockchain, we cannot even take it out. It's like, as is today, I cannot go, you saw the technical explanations before. You cannot just go there a few blocks and say, let's delete this data. And then companies have to keep some kind of data. So if you're putting your company full on chain, as is now, you cannot really comply with our GPT, for example, because after a few years, or if someone asks you, delete my data, you cannot really do that. So we're starting to face new challenges in this side. And once you're talking about transparency, it's a different problem, as we say. Like, if you have someone's wallet address, you can pretty much see everyone that this person did in that wallet. Do we want that? Let's say that I'm going to hire you to do a service. Like, do you need me to see all of your history of transactions with everyone that you ever made in that wallet? For the coin side, it's good for the tracking, it's good for investigation and all of that, but what is the limit of that? Does everyone have to have access to this all the time? I know this is the principle of blockchain and the currencies that we have is for everyone to be able to access the whole information in a very transparent way, but is there any limit for that? It's like, do we want to give all of the access to banks or to regulators, for example? Or can we have some kind of blockers for when they show to the regulator, they have access just to the bit of history that they need to do? So we're starting to have new challenges to kind of old problems.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the balancing act that we need to start solving. Tommaso, thank you for being with us, and I know, of course, that you are leading a huge process of regulation. It's called MiCA. Do you agree with this challenge, and what is this MiCA thing, and why it has such a relevance in the blockchain world?
All right, thank you, first of all, again, for having me here. It's really a pleasure. And I think what Luiza was mentioning, it's indeed a couple of the challenges that we're seeing right now when we talk about regulation for this sector, right? So, and again, I'm the head of regulatory affairs at Blockchain for Europe, which is an association based in Brussels that represents the voice of the blockchain industry with the policymakers in Brussels, right? So my job is really to have these tough conversations with policymakers and try to find, as we're saying now, these compromises between some policy objectives, which is, for example, to understand who's sending money to who, right? We want to make sure that there is some sorts of money laundering checks and checks against terrorist financing, which is, of course, a very hot topic right now. But then these need to also come with this, with the real characteristics of this technology. And so what we try to do is really to talk about what are the intrinsic characteristics of blockchain technology and how does this, how can this live with each other, right? How can such a technology, these processes that we're talking about developing, how can this be done in a regulated environment? Because I think, you know, the topic of today is really cryptoregulation. Cryptoregulation is something that a few years ago, if you would have gone to a conference in, let's say, 2016, 2017, no one even dared to say the word regulation, right? No one wanted to be regulated. There was this idea that regulation was not a thing for the blockchain sector. You know, this was going to be completely living outside of the regulated environment because actually there was, I think, and I have to say, this was a bit of a PR mistake from our industry, that we even said, you cannot regulate us, right? We challenged the regulators to try and regulate these processes, these services, decentralization as a concept.
Because it was very ideology, and there's a huge
of course,
ideology.
it comes from that, and it comes from that. But now I think we are coming out of that dream a bit, and I have to say, I think it's time for us all to wake up a bit from that dream, because we need to understand that if we have to reach mass adoption, this is going to happen in a regulated environment. It's going to happen with regulations that actually protect consumers from existing risks, while at the same time, of course, preserving the innovation that is coming from the blockchain sector. So it's really all about finding this balance, as we're saying right now, between allowing for this innovation to spur and to really reach mass adoption for this interesting technology, but at the same time, we still need to comply with these policy objectives that make sense, at least the ones that make sense. So I'll then jump quickly to MiCA, the Marketing Crypto Assets Regulation. If you haven't heard about that yet, I guess you're lucky, because this is all I hear about and I talk about for the past couple of years, but it's a very important piece of regulation. And it's mainly because it's the first piece of regulation. It's the first comprehensive regulatory framework developed and implemented now by a major jurisdiction like the European Union. And I'm not going to go into all the details of the MiCA regulation, but I think what's important to say there is just one thing. The idea is that now that there is this framework which will start applying as of 1st of January 2025. That's when the full MiCA regulation will come into effect. What is interesting also for everyone here developing, thinking about launching a new project is just the idea of passporting license, right? The idea, the beautiful piece of MiCA is that once it will be coming into force, companies will be able to get one license in one member state, let's say Portugal. You want to establish in Portugal, and I think everybody understands why it's such a beautiful country, and there is a lot of incentives also to try and establish a business here. But once you do that, you get one license, and then you're able to passport that license across the whole European Union, which means that you get access directly to an over 500 million people market, right? So this is the very first important aspect of MiCA, and why other jurisdictions are finally looking at Europe with the idea that we may have done something good, and they may take some, examples from what we have done. It's not perfect. There is a lot to talk about, and of course, we can dive into that. There is a lot of questions. I'm not gonna take all the time now, but I think the one message I wanted to leave the audience with right now is why is this interesting? Is because first of all, it's providing legal clarity, regulatory certainty. Companies now will know what they can do and what they cannot do in Europe. And again, they can do one license process in one member state and get access to the whole single market.
Thank you, Tommaso. Nuno, thank you for joining us on this discussion also. What is your feeling around these first two topics, more or less? And if I can also add a small challenge, do you think this is, what do you think are the key catalysts as a lawyer also to keep this as a process that can kick in for all the companies?
Yeah, thank you for having me here as well and being present in this lovely panel with my dear colleagues. Just to address a little bit of points that were mentioned before, so Bitcoin and the Bitcoin blockchain, the first one, appeared as a pseudonymous network, as it was intended. Not anonymous, and that's really relevant in the privacy part, it's pseudonymous. And the difference is, with pseudonymity, you can identify someone if you have other pieces of information to make the correlation between one predetermined wallet and the information of that person. If you have fully anonymity, you can't do that. So Bitcoin and that specific blockchain was intended to be pseudonymous at first. Now we have the BIP 300, which is another improvement or Bitcoin improvement that will come into force, I believe. That will allow for the full usage of Taproot and to have, well, Bitcoin working a little bit like Zcash or Monero, which will be problematic because nowadays the regulation tends to prohibit these privacy enhanced coins, as the regulation called it, to be transacted in exchanges or centralized exchanges. So I don't want to be a doomsayer, but that could be problematic in the future. Let's see how it happens. For the privacy part, in the beginning, for the MiCA part, I think it's also a good regulation. The possible, not good, but the possible regulation at this stage. It was wonderful that DeFi and truly NFTs were left outside of the scope because, well, DeFi, it's kind of hard to regulate, as blockchain or DLTs as a technological foundational layer is very hard to regulate. You don't really regulate the internet or TCP/IP or the protocols that are the founding blocks of the internet as a whole. So blockchain being just another layer that goes on top of the internet, of that specific protocol, it's really kind of hard to regulate. So we should resort to self-regulation just on the technology part. So I believe, in my opinion, that the markets and crypto assets regulation is very, very good. For the markets part, for the transactional part, for the crypto asset service providers that want to participate somehow in the economical part of having tokens, of issuing tokens, of providing some kind of services to investors, to consumers, to the European consumers, let's say. I think it's good. It really needs to fine-tune some things, maybe in MiCA 2.0. because, well, as you know, MiCA was created to deter Libra or the M from disturbing the forces of the monetary policy in the European Union. That was the main point. That was the fulcrum of the whole regulation, and they had to build a lot of things around it just to say that it's a true law, general and abstract. Like it's a common theme for lawyers. All laws should be general and abstract and don't be targeted to one specific person or company. So that being said, the second question was if this can be good for companies, right?
Just a perception on how will this be of importance for companies to start kicking and
so Tommaso already mentioned that briefly, and I totally agree. This kind of regulations is good to make the transition from Web 2 to Web 3. I think we are still in the need to make the decoupling from blockchain as a technology to the Web 3 or investment part of all of it, the crypto assets part. Yeah. Because, well, the narrative is always, we are still using narratives from 2014 and 2015 with all the Silicon Road thing and free Ross, please. So that's really a problem because, well, DLTs or blockchain are one thing, and you can be a developer of blockchain technology like Polygon or other layer ones. Well, they actually issue tokens, but you can be just a developer and not be abridged by this kind of regulation. But if you want to provide some kind of service and be rewarded for that service in a more or less centralized way, this can be a very good regulation, and it will have the Anna Bradford Brussels effect for the rest of the world, because, well, normally in the European Union we don't invent much stuff or produce anything that's really relevant besides the CD by Philips back in the 1970s and on other things. I'm just making a joke, but we are a very good consumer market, and if someone wants to provide their services or sell something to the European consumers, they will have to adopt our regulations. And I think that will create a level playing field across the world. Maybe the United States will adopt some things of MiCA. Latin America is already adopting the parts of the MiCA or even fully fledged markets and crypto assets regulation in some countries. So I think we'll see that level playing field across the world with this landmark regulation.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you touched a very interesting point. I think it's in terms of when we talk about innovation, it's usually common ground to say that the United States send the product to the street before testing. Asia tries to see how to use that, and Europe regulates everything before launching the product, over-regulating. And that's, Tommaso, I'll take this argument from Nuno and try to challenge you on how do you see the speed of regulation going on. So we see this huge wave of tokenization of assets. So myself, coming from financial markets, I see it like trillions of things that can go on. So it's a huge wave. It's a tsunami. And we know that regulation tends to go slower. So how do you see this? Can we keep up, or we need like a sort of world order to help things to move on?
It's a very good question. I think it's a question we always have when we talk about regulation. And indeed, the famous example of China and the US will be developing flying cars, and Europe will be developing flying stop signs. As the first thing.
Yes,
and this is true. And this is true, generally speaking, because of course technology is faster than regulation, and so the overall objective is to develop regulation which is flexible enough and future-proof, right? So the idea that can be adapted to new market realities, new innovation, new developments. To your point, tokenization is the next big opportunity, and everybody starts to realizing that. Also in the traditional financial sector, I'm speaking with a lot of traditional financial players that are increasingly looking at tokenization, but indeed because of where they're coming from, they need to have that safety, that they know that something has been regulated, that is generally accepted, that is, that there are clear rules on how they can experiment on these things. So for example, MiCA is just part of a digital finance package that the European Commission published in 2018. Another another part of that was the DLT pilot regime. And the DLT pilot regime is exactly this idea of creating kind of a sandbox, right, where traditional financial players could start experimenting with tokenization of financial instruments to try and put them on chain and understand whether this could make certain processes more effective and what could be innovated in that space or not. So these are the type of regulatory proposals that help to develop, to try and experiment with new technologies. But again, there is always this risk that regulation is discussed for at least 2-3 years. We had over, 300 meetings just on this MiCA file with the people in Parliament, in the Commission, and so on. But then by the time that is finalized and it is implemented and then it is reviewed, of course, everything else, has happened in the meantime. So, for example, what Nuno was mentioning earlier, DeFi and NFTs, that's a very interesting point because, yes, DeFi and NFTs are outside of the MiCA regulatory scope, but there is questions. And what does it really mean to be DeFi? That's a question that no one was able to answer yet because MiCA excludes fully decentralized entities. What does it mean to be fully decentralized? Still to be answered. We don't know yet. And this will be defined in what is called in Brussels level 2 legislation that is being developed now. But then with NFTs, same thing. Yes, NFTs are outside of scope. But if you issue a large collection, then it means that this is not that this collection might actually become fungible. These tokens suddenly become fungible, and so they're not NFTs anymore, and so they get captured in the scope. This is just to summarize that there will be indeed some moments in which the European Commission will be producing some reports, some assessments to try and see whether the regulation that they've just finished developing and finalizing and implementing, whether this is already too old, whether it's outdated already and needs to be updated with new rules that, for example, could capture DeFi in the future, but hopefully with a self-regulatory approach, which doesn't really force centralization again, right? Because that's the risk that we face when looking at how do we regulate DeFi. The easier answer, which is what a lot of regulators might be pushing around, is, well, just make it centralized again, have someone that remains in control of all those risks, of all those responsibilities. Well, that's an easy answer, but that's of course not what this sector wants to see. So we hope to see indeed regulators and policymakers that first of all understand the technology. So a lot of the work that we do is about education, right? We do a lot of workshops, a lot of seminars in which we talk about the real characteristics of this technology and we explain to them what is true and what is food, right? To use a term that maybe someone learned today. But in generally, it's we need regulators that are at least that they know that they don't know enough, right? That they understand that there is a lot more that they need to find out before actually implementing rules that will otherwise completely kill this very interesting and very important sector.
Yeah.
If I can make
you should. Of course, I would like to give you the opportunity to challenge some of the arguments that were given before. And but I think that Tommaso also talked about a topic that I wanted to place here for you all, which is the literacy. So we have this all changing environment regarding regulation, and of course it cannot go very far off the need of adapting it to the knowledge that people have. So my challenge, of course, you will discuss whatever, but is how can we place that? Can we have like this digital literacy casted out to the common people, and also have this regulatory framework moving on? So of course you can choose the way you want to make this.
I would just first comment on what Nuno and Tommaso said. I mean, I mostly agree with them, unfortunately. I would like to start an argument, but not today. But on what they were talking about MiCA and about how the whole environment cannot, I mean, we cannot beat technology, to be very fair. Regulators are very, very slow. Legislators are even slower at most points. So, I mean, we cannot beat. And then once we started this whole movement, like worldwide as a community of regulators, the first legislations that we saw, they were so patchy and they were so trying to beat the market and try to regulate things that are on trend. I mean, the biggest example of that is the DAO regulations that everyone knows about. It's like, once we tried to compete with the market and follow the trends, we ended up with half regulations that are not really effective, not really new, and doesn't really work for what we need in the end. So for a lot of them, we created new problems. And then on the other side, we had the whole, and this I think was a great discussion that we had, was how to not ultra-regulate it. So we had to introduce this concept that Nuno was saying about things that need to be self-regulated at some point. We cannot try to regulate everything. We don't need to try to regulate everything. I mean, in any other markets that we have a bunch of points that are not regulated. So why are we trying to do different with the whole Web3 scope if we don't need to? And I think a big learning curve, especially with MiCA, was for us to understand what were the regulators actually worried about. So they were worried about the customer relationship, and they were worried about currency, so where the money is. So let's focus on regulating that instead of trying to do, and I think that was a big point on MiCA, like, let's not regulate NFTs for now, let's not regulate DeFi. This is not where the problem is. Let's focus on that. And then I'm really curious now about how each country is going to, step into that, because even though now we have MiCA, we have the European regulations, we need the countries to start moving on it. And then for the internal bodies and the internal regulators of each country to know what to do with it, because we have, and I mean, Portugal is a great example on tokenization. We have regulations to be able to tokenize it, a bunch of things. We don't have the means to do that. I mean, if you go to tokenization of real estate, it's possible in theory. Yeah, if you go to any conservatoria, they will look at you like, you're crazy. We cannot do this in our system. It's not here. So, and then that bridge with the education part of it on, okay, how can we educate it? I think first thing is, and I also agree with Nuno on that, is we have to start being a bit seamless. Once we started to regulate things that are on the internet, we didn't try to regulate the internet itself. It's completely nonsense. We regulate aspects of it, but the technology itself, it was not our focus. So why we're focusing on this on Web3 or on blockchain? Do we need every single user to understand in details how the blockchain work? Not really. Most people that are developing it.
Nuno's challenging. Go, Nuno.
No?
I don't want to challenge, just to add, just to add a little bit of
Challenge in the positive way.
point. Yeah. It's rather funny that three jurists, let's say, agree most of the time. It's not normal. You have two persons and three different opinions.
I'm not making my job right.
Yeah. So but basically, well, all this regulation is because now we can have. I think we should regulate services and not the technology that it's the underlying connection of everything, and that's problematic in this space because we are trying to regulate the economic part of everything. That's why I talked about the decoupling of things, because now the narrative is that everything is a crypto asset. Crypto assets are mostly used to exchange for fiat money in centralized exchanges, and everyone gets rich, and it's a get-rich scheme, get-rich-quick scheme, and it's not about that. We should start, as Tommaso said, and also Luiza on the learning curve, we need to do more events like this one, but not for the bubble, for the people that really don't understand anything about this, especially lawmakers. Because they need to, if they are creating laws that affect us as an industry, they need to understand what they are doing. And that's why it's so important to have these kind of initiatives like Tommaso is leading and explaining to lawmakers how to make good things and not to, because it's better to have nothing at all than to have a bad regulation. And another point is that, well, for the economic part, the fiat money system got really scared of all of this, because you are basically extracting value from the normal fiat rails to another parallel mean of exchange value throughout the internet without any kind of intermediary. And that affects a lot of people, especially the Keynesians that need to print money to live on, and the governments that live from the crony capitalism that we live nowadays, that live from that money printing. So completely, I'm with my Portuguese Blockchain Association hat now, president now. It's not the Nuno, the lawyer. Well, nowadays we need to explain how can this be, especially the parts that we can regulate and the others that we don't. But we need to live with this. Bitcoin cannot be stopped, especially. All the EVMs and everything else, all the layer ones that allows us to have decentralized applications, they cannot be stopped as well, although we can create regulation that kills it with the Data Act and that kill switch, that's problematic.
That, no.
Yeah, let's not go into that.
I mean, happy to.
Yeah, but
in another hour.
I think we should just to summarize, we need to do more things like this and to talk with and to speak very clearly, very openly to lawmakers and to explain to them what they can do and what they can't do. Policymakers, because, well, they need our votes.
Yeah.
And if that's the problem that we are seeing in the United States now. A lot of appeals are coming into the community because we can influence the policies that governs us. It's not the other way around. So we as a community, we should get together and force the ones that we delegate in the democracy, we delegate the power to rule us or to create rules for everyone, to adopt the good things and leave the bad things aside.
Okay, guys, let's me just, we're just running a bit out of our between us time, so I think now it's the time for us to open the discussion for questions of the public. So I don't know if anyone wants to challenge our speakers, or
It's good to see people interested in regulation.
Fast hands.
yeah, I think I see a few hands.
Mics, or should we just come and bring a mic?
Yeah.
The mic's all here?
Should
I mean, I just do it, whatever. Do everything. There you go.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks a lot. Actually, I have a question to you. So,
I'll lend you mine, no
okay,
worries.
thanks a lot. I'm the representative of a legal consulting company from Estonia, and actually, as you know, Estonia was one of the first European countries which started to accept crypto and started to give companies crypto licenses. But government, I don't know, maybe they didn't like crypto or something like this, but in a few years, they made some restrictions, and crypto laws in Estonia became not very pleasant to crypto holders. So our clients moved to Lithuania. As you know, on the 1st of January of this year, Lithuania adopted new crypto regulations, and now we are still looking for another jurisdiction for our clients. So my question is, right now we are on Madeira in Portugal, and as you know, there is a free zone in Madeira which accepts 5% tax, and actually this is the most pleasant tax in the whole Europe. You won't find any other places with such taxes. The question is, will MiCA influence on some local tax laws? Will it allow our clients to move to Portugal, to Madeira, or we will need still in search for other jurisdictions?
So that's a good question. The short answer is no, because taxation is a national competence, so each member state has its own taxation policies. This goes into a much broader debate about the European fiscal union, right? We have a monetary union, we don't have a fiscal union, but that's a much larger debate. The thing is that, yes, taxation is an important aspect, of course, and so it's understandable why companies are looking for more favorable jurisdictions. But let's just, keeping MiCA in mind, let's not just focus on taxation. What I will suggest everyone is to look at the holistic picture, to really think about, yes, where do I get a favorable taxation framework, but also where do I have an easier way to get a license? Where do I have a regulator that will actually that is competent and understands what I'm building, and will be giving me the license in a shorter time, which then allows me to passport that license across the rest of the European Union. There is a lot of also on the grandfathering clause from MiCA, which is also important to keep in mind. So the idea that you get a license and then you get an extended period to work under the national laws before MiCA applies. So in short, taxation will not be changed by MiCA. This is a whole other debate. But MiCA, generally speaking, or this regulatory harmonization at European level is very important, because then at least you will know that each member state will have the same rules on everything else but taxation. So sorry for that.
I'm sorry, one more quick question. Is it possible for MiCA, if a country outside European Union is interested in such regulation, to attach this country, or this is only for European Union?
So what Nuno was saying before is very important, right? So once, if you have a company that is established outside of European Union, generally speaking, not just for crypto, if you want to service European citizens, right, you need to comply with European rules. So this is also a whole concept about reverse solicitation, which is another big debate. But the idea is really that if you want to provide crypto asset services to the European Union, wherever you're established, then you will need to comply with the MiCA rules. So there is no way around that, if that's the question.
Okay, thanks a lot for your answers.
Very welcome, thank you.
Anyone care to comment on this?
Of course.
Okay.
I mean,
So-
no, it's
okay.
basically what he said.
Okay, so we have another question. Oh,
So, let's start. I think this is a... Yeah, I'm a founder of Unrocket that is transforming real estate transactions and that are aiming real estate tokenization. So I'm a person that knows really well the regulation. But what I think is that regulation is the first step, but then we need to have some consequences for the lobbies that are in the market. I will give an example. For example, notaries, like in Portugal, is a profitable business for about 800 years, okay? And right now they are in danger. Silence, a little bit of silence. So there's a problem. Why? First of all, I will give some real examples about our go-to-market strategy. We can start about the qualified digital signatures, okay? There's a problem for the lawyers, for the solicitors. Why? Because they charge 12 to 30 euros to the realtors. And right now, I'm charging 0. But the problem is that these guys are telling to the realtors that we are not legal. So the legislation for me, it's like a consequence, you know, because in the ground, it's really difficult. And that's why I transformed the company in a GovTech company also. That's my solution for this case. So we need to think all about this problem first. I think the regulation gives a path, but we need more about this, okay? This is the first example. Then we can talk about tokenization, and I think it's a dream right now. And Tommaso, you know, and I know also the blockchain service infrastructure, okay? I'm really expecting that become more mature about, not just for my business, but about the better societies and better democracies, because that's my biggest impact. So one thing about real estate tokenization is that we can tokenize companies, but in the end, to democratize the investment in real estate, we need to implement a unique property register. And I think this will have to be our real objective in the mid-term, long-term. So my question is, what do you think about the path of the legislation and about the consequence in the ground, where the people like me want to have some real impact, not just talking, and sorry about my wording, about some bullshit.
yeah, okay, thank you. Who wants to take this? Nuno?
Just before passing the ball to Luiza, I just wanted to add that we are developing a national strategy. You were going to say that?
Go for it.
No,
Go for it.
It was just that we are developing, talking about what Tiago said and shared with us, we are developing a national strategy on this side. And one of the key points from the public institution, the Instituto de Registro de Notariado, is developing or allowing for an integration or an API with tokenized realty and blockchain. So they are developing that proof of concept. I hope they can launch it publicly. And yes, so was that?
That was part of what I was going to say. But and then going back to that is, it started because we have a regulation. I know it's not all of because of that, but I mean, you were challenging the whole regulation. That's how we do. And we had a regulation that allowed us to do tokenization, and now we didn't have how to implement it. So now people are moving on, okay, how can we implement it? How can we make this feasible? And this is one thing. And the other thing you were talking about, I mean, digital signatures, and we have a regulation that says this is how you can turn your signature public or recognized or whatever. So, I mean, I cannot put a cap in my head and start going around saying, I will say that your signature is valid and legal. We have, I mean, a notarial code of that. People follow that code. If we can change the code, I'm not saying that the code is perfect and the system is perfect. I don't think it is at all. But we have rules to follow. So if you want to change that, let's change the rules, and then we change how can we apply them.
Just wanted to add.
Sorry. One moment. People go to the notary and deliver a paper with my qualified certificate. And the notary say, I don't accept this. And legislation is written.
Yeah, it's a repeat regulation.
How can I say
this?
this?
Regulation. It's applicable to all member states. And by the way, that's what I wanted to mention. By the way, since 1999, we had a law in Portugal that give the same attributes for electronic qualified signature as an handwritten. Yeah. But nowadays, even with the IDAS regulation that came into force in 2014, and it's applicable to all member states, we now have revoked that law from 99 and made a new one. COVID was also good to push that forward. But even the banks don't accept that kind of signatures nowadays. So, and the law is perfectly clear.
We still have trapo-style documents, and we have certified signature, and we still.
Guys, that's not a problem of it's more the execution. It's more the execution of the law. That's sometimes that's problematic. It's the execution, and people don't complain enough. That's a big problem in Portugal as well. People should complain. I'm not trying to sell litigation solutions as a lawyer.
I'll let Tommaso wrap it, but please wrap it because I see Katarina looking for.
And I know the feeling. I've been in your position, so I really know that
she's not happy.
I wanted to leave with a positive note because I mean it's true that there is these issues, and it's true that there needs to be a lot more to be done besides regulation. Right? Regulation is not enough. But what I can tell you is that there is at least now an understanding in Brussels that we have done some good moves, and that there needs to be done a lot more in terms of funding, in terms of opportunities, in terms of really prioritizing the implementation of these technologies and the adoption of these technologies also from traditional businesses. So I think what we mentioned before, the elections are coming up, right? In June, we have European elections. Let's go vote. Let's also make sure that these are important topics that we use to evaluate our policymakers, because that's how we really see that change implemented then in the next class of European policymakers that will hopefully understand the technology better and actually introduce regulation that will help us all to achieve what we're trying to do.
Spam the email boxes of the MIPs of the parliamentaries of.
Okay, guys, thank you for your participation and also for sharing your thoughts. A big applause to our spokesman, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.